Hey, Tim, how are you? You hear me okay?
I got you.
Hey, man, we coming on. Hey, you don't have any issues with us recording this and
Oh,
posting
no.
on the website and over with that?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Yeah,
No, I'm an
so,
attention whore. You don't even have to ask me.
oh, good, good. We're gonna get this off. I'm gonna introduce you, right? And then the controls are yours.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna let the audience know though, we're gonna reserve about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A.
Okay.
And what we'll do is I'll read the questions out to you. Or Ms. Amanda will read the questions to you, and then give you a chance to respond. Depending on how much time you have at the closeout, will be how many questions we can, get in. But we appreciate you doing it, man. Thank you.
Yeah. No, I'm excited to be here.
Good. Well, we're excited to have you, so that's awesome. All right, we're gonna go ahead and keep until we get to time to start.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Hey, Tim, before we get started, I think your Teams is open on your slides. Yeah, there we go. All right, well, for you, those of you that don't know me, I'm Bob Ross. I'm the director of the Cyber Fusion Innovation Center. Every quarter, we get the honor of hosting our Connector Series talks. Today, our speaker is going to be Tim Chrisman. Tim's a former CIA officer, a retired Army Special Operations officer, and a leading voice in the intersection of national security, private capital, and innovation. With nearly 2 decades of national security experience, he has played pivotal roles in shaping defense innovation and space policy. Tim is a serial entrepreneur, a partner at Distinctive Edge Partners, and an advisor to venture capital funds seeking to align technological advancements with strategic national priorities. Tim is also the author of 2 books, Humanity in Space and the Third Age of Geopolitical Capital, which he's going to speak with us today about. Tim holds multiple patents, including innovations in anti-radiation supplements, and has published extensively on the future of geopolitics, space, and technology, offering actionable insights for policymakers, military leaders, and investors. A frequent speaker at global defense and innovation forums, Tim is known for his thought-provoking perspectives on navigating the complexities of modern power dynamics. Through his career, Tim has consistently championed bold ideas and practical solutions to ensure America's strategic leadership in an era of rapid change. Tim, I really appreciate you coming out. I first met Tim out in Colorado Springs at the National Security Venture Capital Summit. Tim, we're honored to have you here today to speak to our audience. Everybody was really looking forward to this talk. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Thank you. Bios always read a bit like award citations back when I was in the Army, and I get a little uncomfortable. So glad that's out of the way. Yeah, as mentioned, so we're here to talk about the third age of geopolitical capital, and we'll get into more about that. This book came out of a few years of research that I did around what is driving geopolitical competition. When you look back through history, you can kind of see, it sometimes was as capricious as one warlord didn't really like the look on another warlord's face, and so that drove the geopolitics of the day. But over time, it's become much more complex, and there are much more actors. There's a lot more happening, but that still didn't quite pin down what is different now. And so we're gonna get into that. We're gonna get into what is private capital, because that is what it's a core part of my thesis, that private capital is what is driving geopolitical change, and look at that throughout time, and how that affects a handful of domains that are particularly relevant to Army cyber, before going into a lot of great info, but what can you do about it? All right, so before we kick off, this is something that hopefully none of us lived through. 1961, Berlin. This was a moment when it popped up on the news, went around the world. A standoff at Checkpoint Charlie. U.S. tanks on one side, Soviet tanks on the other. Everybody's locked and loaded. Everybody there is sure they are minutes away from conflict between the 2 greatest powers of the day. They just, most people alive have lived through what this looks like. They know what's coming. We fast forward to today, we're in another era of great power competition. There's no checkpoint Charlie. There's no tanks sitting, 100 meters apart, no soldiers, just poised to bayonet each other. But the battle for power is just as real as it was then, except now that battle is playing out in AI research labs, quantum computing startups, private spaceports. We don't see platoon leaders, company commanders, battalion commanders maneuvering their units in the field, preparing for imminent conflict. We see CEOs and venture capitalists and engineers figuring out what is the next big thing. And they're not thinking it's going to be used in war, but it will be. We don't have government at the pointy end of the technological spear anymore. And that makes me uncomfortable because no longer is the US military the holder of the high ground. That high ground is being held by private companies and private individuals. Cool. So, any good talk, I'm supposed to scare you. This, we all got this in middle school. That's why we didn't do drugs. We were all scared away from them. But why does this matter to, all of us in the room? Why does it matter to Army Cyber, to the military in general? Well, aside from the fact that when you're in the military, you would prefer to control the high ground, it's important to recognize the world that we are in and what we're going to fight in. In World War II, if you wanted the best technology for making war, a fighter jet, for instance, who funded it? Who paid for the manufacturing of it and took delivery? It was the US government. Cutting edge tech in the Cold War, from nuclear weapons to the internet and GPS, that was, again, US government paid for, developed, built it. Today, you want cutting edge tech. The US government does not fund it, does not buy it, and in many cases, it is not allowed to be used in government systems, government installations. It is being deployed, scaled, and improved entirely by private capital. And private capital, in a nutshell, is money that people who have too much money put into assets that the rest of us can't buy. It's generally broken up into three buckets: venture capital, which is the super risky stuff that backs early technology. There's private equity, more of what is buying and selling malls and hospitals. This is more like buying into established things that have revenue, with the idea of turning it around, generating more revenue. Then we've got sovereign wealth funds, which I lumped in with family offices for the simple reason that a family office is the organization that handles the money of a very rich person. They hire people to handle the money, to make investments, to decide where that money goes. A sovereign wealth fund is that for a country. And so that's why they're lumped together. These all usually work together. A venture capital fund will oftentimes raise money from sovereign wealth funds, family offices, private equity funds. Private equity will buy venture-backed companies. It's a circular economy in the private capital world, and in many cases, it is mirrored by what happens in public capital. Public capital is anything that is traded on a stock market. So if there is a financial tool that is used publicly, be it a loan, a bond, a mortgage, there is likely the equivalent of that on the private side. There are just additional rules that make it so normal people can't risk a lot of their money in these investments because they're very high risk. And oftentimes there are failures. And so if Elon Musk throws $1 million at 100 companies and 99 of them fail and one of them becomes a $100 billion company, he wins. If my parents throw their entire retirement into 5 companies the odds are not good that they found that one company that's going to make it big. They're likely to lose it all. And so that's where a lot of the rules come in around why things are private capital versus public. A key commonality between all of these, other than mainly really rich people with big egos, is every single one of these moves exponentially faster than the US government. And that is not simply because they deploy less money. There are hundreds of billions of dollars moving through these funds every day. A venture capital firm may make a $350 million bet on a company with 2 to 4 weeks of due diligence. A sovereign wealth fund may make billion-dollar bets based on a single meeting. So the speed at which this money moves is unprecedented from a government's perspective. And that is something that has a dramatic impact when you're looking at technology development and how that plays out with national security. We see that with satellite coverage in Ukraine. Starlink, part of a privately backed company, SpaceX. Traditional defense contractors could not get better satellite coverage for satellite communication in Ukraine. Starlink did. They already had the satellites up, shipped thousands of terminals almost overnight. In many cases, donated these terminals. And within weeks, there was satellite communications across Ukraine, supporting US national interest. This was good. This was helpful. However, because it was not done through a traditional defense contractor, because it was done sort of on a whim, there was no control for the US government. We've seen multiple times Starlink being turned off or access to it being denied because it remains a privately held company answerable to a single person, Elon Musk. And so we see right now on the battlefield a core tool for the fight against Russia is not in the hands of the US or our allies. It is in the hands of a private company. And this is something that plays out across other verticals across the world, and is only going to be accelerated. And I say that because we have entered, sometime in the last 10 years, we have entered the third age of geopolitical capital. The three ages, as I laid them out, go from, and I did not do this on a timeline because it looks really goofy. The first stage is from when first tribes start emerging and go to war with each other until roughly before World War II. So almost the entirety of human history. Looks awkward on a timeline when you've got the first stage being that much space. In this time, the core driver of geopolitics is how much the public can spend. How much can the government spend in marshaling resources, land, equipment into war? This is why there were vast colonizations undertaken in Europe, was how do we find the gold, the coal, the iron, the spices that will generate the money we need to go to war with these guys that live next door that we really, really hate because their food is almost the same as ours and nothing ticks us off more than almost the same food. And that was what wars were fought over, was I want this rock, you want that rock, I'm going to build a navy until I can take your rock from you. And whoever could control the most resources, the most physical resource, whoever could hold the most in their hand, that was who was strongest. And that is, it's almost wired into our DNA that, oh, of course, he who has the most is the winningest. But what we started to see post World War II in this second age was it started to shift. Yes, government still spent inordinate amounts of money to develop and deploy technologies, but we saw these public institutions start to emerge. We saw stock markets start to take hold, where whether it was things like the International Monetary Fund or World Bank, the New York Stock Exchange, there were institutions to leverage money that investors put into markets to develop new technologies, to enhance economic growth. There was still some government control here. The government still bought most of the things that were made, most of the weapons, most of the new technologies that could be used geopolitically were still bought by governments. But there was now this nascent thing where money didn't all come from government. It wasn't the only driver of geopolitical change. And really around the 2008, 2009 timeframe, this age starts to end. And the third age emerges between then and 2015, where it's not government contracts, it's not stock markets that are driving innovation in geopolitics. It is these venture capitalists who can fund startups in weeks, who can develop new systems that will go into space, something previously only possible with the backing of a government. We are now in an era where private AI companies have more computing power than any government, where private quantum firms have the ability to break encryption faster than new standards can be set, where space companies launch and control more satellites than any other government, oftentimes, but than every other government combined. This is now the era we live in, where private capital is a geopolitical force, and it is shaping who wins, whether it's the AI race, whether it's global supply chains, whether it is this era of great power competition. So the nature of power is shifting. And it's not to say bombs and bullets don't matter. It is that there is this shift where it is no longer just about those and no longer just about having the most of those. It's no longer just who has the best ships, tanks, or nukes. We now have to factor in who has the most computing power, who has the best AI models. And I wanted to go through a couple of these examples. Starting with AI, we'll then go into quantum, we'll go into space. I'm assuming in general that there is a level of technical knowledge about these that is beyond the general public. But if not, somebody stop me and say I'm glancing over things that shouldn't be. So when we're now in this era where power is defined more broadly, where, if we look back to June 4th in 1942, where US and Japanese naval forces are preparing for battle near Midway Atoll. Japanese thought, hey, we're getting a drop on the Americans, when in fact they're sailing into a trap. Americans had broken the Japanese code weeks earlier, had been able to do that with enough time to position naval assets, to ambush these carriers, these Japanese carriers, and shift the tide of war in the Pacific. That was a monumental feat at the time, where we were able to do that with sufficient time, sufficient space. Now we're in an era where those human code breakers are not needed. We don't need someone in a darkened bunker deciphering radio transmissions. We have, the entire world has access through things like ChatGPT, AI systems that are capable of analyzing and manipulating communications in near real time. We don't need thousands of intelligence officers decoding messages. We have machine learning algorithms that can predict what's next, generate deceptive signals that mirror the ones that are being sent by either us or our adversaries. This is all within the realm of possible now at the unclassified level. And none of these systems are the ones that are owned by the government. And it's comforting to think maybe there are better ones. Maybe there are classified systems. Maybe there are classified protections that government does have. And I have no classified knowledge one way or the other. But I do know what is publicly available is controlled by private entities that are not subject to the dictates of what the military wants and are operating according to market incentives. We're living through an arms race where multiple what would otherwise have been secret and or top secret capabilities developed by nation states are being developed in public, and there is a race to release the better ones as fast as possible to the public. And so when there is the next midway, it's likely to be won by algorithms, by these AI assistants. And the question is going to be, who controls them? Who is the one that is going to wield the best tool, the best system, and ultimately shape the next conflict? This is, we've already seen AI transforming cyber operations, whether it's automated hacking, synthetic identities, AI-driven disinformation that's highly personalized, that is able to manipulate things at speed and scale. While the US government is stuck with budgets that move on 3 to 5 year cycles. And bureaucrats who are used to buying products on that cycle, not understanding that there may be a transformational difference between an AI model that is made today in February 2025 and one that is made in May 2025. And that if you start procuring the one that's in February and you don't complete that procurement for 9 to 12 months, you'll be 3 models behind, functionally buying something that is useless. This is just not something that a government formed in the Cold War has ever had to think about. And so what I and others like me are pushing wherever we can, whether it's in talks with Congress people, with the incoming administration, is wherever possible, finding ways to partner with these AI firms. Most of these firms are not trying to build terminators that are, they're not trying to do anything nefarious. They're kids in a garage that are excited about their idea and it got traction and they're running with it. And many of them welcome feedback from potential users. And we have seen great success when military units reach out to these organizations, say, hey, here's some, applications we would like to use it in. We'd love to set up a cooperative research agreement. We'd love to figure out how we can work together. They benefit because they get to talk about, hey, they're working with a government entity. That helps them as they're fundraising. The military is able to then help shape what the end product is. Because at the end of the day, many units are not in a position to fight the procurement war. That's happening at congressional levels, and there's little to nothing that can be done. But local partnerships can be done. You can, even if it's informally, have those conversations and actually make a difference there, at least on the AI side. Because at the end of the day, it is about how can the U.S. military, as we're in this era of great power competition, how can the military integrate private sector AI at speed and scale? That may start with just those partnerships. But if we don't integrate that AI, we may never even know we lost the AI war. All right, let's talk about quantum, that thing that's never really there. We can't look at it or know where it's at or where it's going at the same time. Sorry about the Heisenberg joke there. If you got it, you got it. If not, I apologize. So looking at quantum, AI is sucking up all the headlines. Quantum has been quietly moving and building capacity for several decades now. It's starting to get close to an inflection point related to cybersecurity, encryption, and communications. If you don't know about quantum computing, it's not just a faster computer. It is systems that think in ways that conventional or classical computers cannot, and solve problems that they can't solve at all. And so encryption that may be completely uncrackable or would take so long on a classical computer might not be a problem for a quantum computer to crack. Most of the standards around cryptography are based on mathematical problems that take millions of years to solve. Quantum computers can do these in hours or minutes. And so that becomes a problem for people who deal with classified material, encrypt their information. There is a lot of work being done on post-quantum cryptography. I am not qualified to know how any of that works, other than to know people who know how to do quantum are doing that. And for that, I am grateful. Quantum's also has a lot of potential around optimizing logistics, analyzing intelligence, designing advanced materials, helping with sensor development. It has a wide range of potential applications. But what I think is important to take away is this is not something that is just happening tomorrow. There are early stage quantum computers solving problems that classical computers cannot, that have been demonstrated by Google, IBM, and Chinese firms. Quantum is now a national security priority from the DoD, and there are tens of billions of dollars being invested into quantum-related research, whether that is quantum communication, quantum-resistant encryption, secure, ways to secure regular satellite communications. Like AI, U.S. quantum development is almost entirely private sector led, whether that is Google and IBM, a variety of other smaller venture-backed firms. There is some government research into quantum cybersecurity, quantum sensors, and the like. But this is, again, something that eventually will determine how encryption is done, how decryption is done, will help revolutionize material science. And it is almost entirely being done by private investors, private companies that are, in many cases, having no contact with the US government or the US military. With that, many of these firms have been laboring for years in relative obscurity and are desperate to try to find ways that they can take their tech and apply it to real world problems. From other people in the venture community that I've talked to, there are a number of quantum companies that look for, they're out there looking for investment. But one thing that is repeated to me by all of these investors is until they see them working with potential customers, they don't feel that it's worth investing. And so this is where, like with AI, I try to advise, especially DoD and Intel community organizations, reach out to these quantum companies. They need to be able to show they're engaging with potential customers. You talking to them has nothing to do with whether or not you're going to buy anything. And whether they tell their what they, say to their investors is their own business. But they are motivated to talk to, work with, and figure out how to apply what they're doing into defense problems. But oftentimes they have no idea who to even talk to. These are some of the nerdiest people you will ever meet, who have fewer social skills than low-functioning autistic people. and they may never find you. And so if you have a chance, you have an interest, reach out, talk to them. It need not commit you or the US government to anything. Talking to them is something these companies love to do, and it's easy. So it gives both sides a way to engage with each other in ways that are not being done right now. Ultimately, this is a long-term play. Quantum is not something like AI that's evolving on 3 to 6 month cycles. Quantum's a much longer timeline, and because of that, needs people that are engaging early and often to help understand how what is being built will apply in the real world. All right, space. Last of these case studies. The space historically has been the last safe domain for government. First, humans, we wandered. We've always wandered. That's what we do. I joke with people that we're basically monkeys that learn to wear pants. And we wandered land. And then we found out things floated, and we decided we wanted to go on water. So we took to the water, and eventually we took to the skies. But space is held out as that domain that was too hard for regular people to go to, that it was government controlled, government dominated. But over the past 5-6 years, that has shifted, where it is no longer a government heavy or government dominated domain. We now have a single company that launches more satellites than all other nation states combined, and that's SpaceX. We have a single company, again, SpaceX, providing real-time communications all over the world with as good or lower latency than most countries' satellite communication systems. For the first time in history, there is no domain of human existence where the US military does not control or dominate the assets of. And obviously, history started when the US military took over being dominant. Before that, didn't exist. And so this is something that would be the equivalent of, in World War II, every aircraft carrier being owned by a different private company. Every shipping company owning destroyers and submarines. Like the scale of how different this is hard to understand, because for most of us, space isn't real. Space is like, yeah, there's astronauts there. Like Elon Musk talks about it a lot. Like whatever. It still feels very science fiction, even to me. And I have 4 people I know who have been to space. Like that's, if I could go back in time and tell my 8-year-old self who used to watch Star Trek and think how cool it would be to go to space, that he's going to know people who go to space. I think that's the coolest thing in the world. And I kind of do. But space is no longer just an esoteric thing. Multiple countries have tested anti-satellite weapons. There are multiple opportunities to deny core US capabilities like GPS, like surveillance, that are being developed by our adversaries. And yet most innovation related to space is being done by private companies. Most of the current infrastructure available to respond to space events, that infrastructure, whether it's communications, launch, recovery, is privately done. The legacy systems that used to launch satellites for the US government or be able to supply spaceports are aging or operate with such infrequency as to be irrelevant. They're still attempting to launch giant school bus size satellites once a year, while SpaceX is doing over 100 launches a year and launching several thousand satellites a year. And so it creates a a real challenge where the military is almost completely dependent on private space companies for access to and operations in space. And these are companies that are privately held, which means shares of them can be bought and sold without being disclosed. There is no public ledger of who owns stock in SpaceX. So in theory, foreign investment fund could buy controlling shares in SpaceX. It's unlikely to happen, but play along with me for a second. And now they hold a deciding vote on whether or not SpaceX will allow Starlink to be used by the US military, whether or not SpaceX will allow launch at their facilities for rapid response to crises. And so this is a very real and now unique problem. It's not something that has been confronted before, and it's something that is hard to understand how different it is. Talked about a lot of this. So we've a lot of this we've covered, whether it's the speed, whether it's defense contracting. One thing we haven't hit on is the very real risk in this new regime. But the benefit is fairly obvious. Technology is developed faster than it's ever been developed. And there is very little risk to the government in that technology's development. But whereas in the past, when the Manhattan Project is going on, or there are large classified programs conducting research into space or other technologies, our adversaries had to run massive espionage programs to infiltrate our labs, our military units. That's no longer necessary. We've already seen Chinese venture capital funds investing in US AI and quantum startups. And what does that mean to invest in these companies? Well, oftentimes investors get an inside look at what's being developed. They get access to the technical details of what that company is developing, and in effect would get enough information to recreate it elsewhere. And this is done because, and if you're an investor in that company, you want that company to succeed. China doesn't necessarily care to. And for far less than it costs to run an espionage program, they can take minority stakes in technology startups. We saw them in 2021 take a stake in a US semiconductor startup that was working on next generation chip designs for AI and defense application. A quantum startup in 2023 received money from a Hong Kong-based fund that ended up, they didn't know it was a Hong Kong-based fund. They thought it was Singapore-based, and gave access to that fund to some of their breakthroughs in encryption that they had developed. So this is a new risk where the old ideas around security, keeping spies out, preventing leaks, doesn't go far enough, because these companies are being run by engineers, are being run by people who, quite frankly, barely can tell one country from another on the map. And when they're offered money to fund their baby, are like, sure, I'll take it. And there are oftentimes not a lot of good safeguards to help them. It's not that they want to hurt America. It's not that they want to give technology away. They just don't know. And that's where I think it's important for those of us working with startups to let them know that there's more at stake than just the technology that they're developing. There's more going on here. There is ways that foreign adversaries can take advantage of them and cause significant harm across the US. Yeah, so that's that. Let's see. We've talked about a lot of this. I don't think it is news to anyone that it would be nice to speed up procurement, that it'd be nice to have more public-private partnerships, and that the supply chain needs more security. So I'll wrap things up here. We are living in a time, and while a lot of what I said might be alarming, I do not say it to alarm you. I merely say it because it is. And I have told myself a long time ago, I will live in the world that is. I will not wish for the world that could be. And so the world we live in is the first time in history where the most advanced technology usable to win a war is not being developed by a government. It is being built by private individuals, funded by private money. And there's really two options. Either fall behind and fight the next war with the tools that were used to win the last war, or adapt and integrate with the speed of private innovation. This isn't just theoretical. This isn't, this is happening now, and it is going to be, can we keep up? Not just related to AI, quantum, and space. It's across the board. And ultimately, that is what I am trying to do. I wrote the book. I am speaking to you. I'm actively working with companies, agencies, investors, helping them navigate getting into government, helping government agencies adapt to private sector innovation, helping investors understand the national security implications of what they're doing. And so I'm excited that we're talking today, and I definitely want to keep this discussion going. If you are, working these problems, would love to connect and chat through what's next, so that when we look back at our own Checkpoint Charlie moments, we're able to look back and see, just like we do to the one that happened in 61, where it's like, well, yeah, it was scary, but we won. That's what I want us to be able to do when we look back and we're like, yeah, that was scary, but we won the AI race. Quantum worked out in our favor. We got a handle on space. And so from there, I'll open it up. What questions do you have?
Hey, Tim, yeah, we've got one in the chat right now. I'd like to give the audience the opportunity to type their questions in the chat, which we'll go ahead and read back to you. My question is, if you would provide some thoughts on President Trump's new executive order establishing a U.S. sovereign wealth fund, in which he's directed the Treasury and Commerce departments to start planning out use of that fund. One example he gave was potentially buying TikTok. I'd be interested in hearing some of the advantages and the disadvantages to the U.S. citizen of having something like this created.
Yeah. No, I worked with, prior to the election, I worked with both of the transition teams talking about creating a sovereign wealth fund. Both were very interested. We talked a lot about how this could be funded, how this could be done without needing congressional appropriations, how there's a lot of money circulating in the federal government that could be reallocated to a fund like this, at least temporarily. Obviously, my view is using it to buy TikTok is a suboptimal use of it. I find TikTok slightly annoying, but I'm too old for TikTok, so I'm the wrong audience. I recognize that, and my kids tell me that all the time. That said, I think that this could be a very useful tool for the US government to signal interest in technologies at speed and scale. Right now, the federal government relies on two mechanisms to signal interest in technologies. One is appropriated dollars that then get funneled into contracts. The second are essentially statements by an agency saying, we really care about this technology. Almost never comes with money, almost never is actually materializes in any meaningful way. It just says we care about it, which is not nothing, but as Congress has increasingly just appropriated the same programs year over year, it's gotten to a point where there is very little space for innovation within appropriated dollars. And so this offers a way for the executive branch to move faster, invest in things, and do it in a way that, if properly managed, and I have no reason to think it wouldn't be properly managed, could be very lucrative for the federal government. Norway seeded their sovereign wealth fund with a few tens of millions of dollars, and it is several $1 trillion in about 22 years. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, but Tim, can you comment on any of the, the downside risks of that fund? What can go wrong with it? I think that's the interesting part.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, so the downside is that it becomes a slush fund for whatever the president wants to use it for buying TikToks, for investing in companies that are, donating to campaigns. It very much has the potential to be a tool for cronyism and rewarding political donors. I think that we see this in sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East, where it is very often used to fund the friends and relatives of the people in power, sort of solidifying this oligarchy.
So I guess a good analogy would be what the Teamsters pension fund was to the mafia back in the 60s and 70s.
Yes.
It could be that way for whichever political party has.
Whoever is in power, it could be used as that slush fund. Yes.
Yeah. I'm just reading off of some of the anger that I see on social media over this whole executive order. But I want to get to some of the, we got a couple of questions for the audience. The first question, and I believe this has to do with when you were talking about space-based assets. An audience member said, why would you consider foreign ownership a key risk?
Yeah. So a big piece of that is that, so it could be a risk depending on the country. And it is only a risk if we are not friendly with that country, and if it is that country that has the ownership stake. If it is a British investor, we're probably fine. A sovereign wealth fund from Saudi Arabia, well, now it is, are we friendly with Saudi Arabia at the time? And does, because that sovereign wealth fund acts as an arm of the government. Many Chinese, Russian, and other adversarial countries, their investment funds, even if they're nominally private, operate on behalf of their government. There was a fund I talked with about 6 months ago, was really interested in investing in SpaceX. The people I was talking with were out of California. Nobody was investing at the time. They wanted to invest, had a meeting with them. They're like, yeah, the guy who runs our family office is going to be here from Hong Kong next week. He wants to invest $50 million in SpaceX. And he, is really excited about being able to see all the new technical developments. And I was like, it's not on the table. You never disclosed that you're representing a foreign investor, certainly not one from China. I can no longer help you, and nor would I want to. But that is what they've been trying to do. Where no one else is investing, they're trying to throw tens of millions of dollars at these founders in the hopes of being able to see what they're developing and then possibly steal it.
Oh, great. Next question they have for you, Tim, is so on quantum computing and development that has been around for a while. The audience member asks, why is it taking so long for it to evolve or to continue to evolve?
Yeah, it's my understanding that it's what has held a lot of development around quantum computing back over the last 10 or so years has been two things. One, a way to write operating systems to actually use the computer. And two, materials to help cool it and keep it cool. In order for these to work, they have to be kept as pretty close to absolute zero, which is very challenging to do at scale. And so that is my understanding. I am not a technical expert in quantum, and there might be dozens more actual real reasons, and those were just the two I read in Popular Science.
Well, I can tell you, we have at the CFIC here, we have a number of partners that have post-quantum encryption platforms that are quite remarkable.
Yeah.
And that's the big concern is the post-quantum encryption capability. When you start talking qubits and things like that quantum physics, I have to tap out, just like you said. It's some pretty heavy stuff. But it is fascinating because I remember 10 years ago doing work where we were talking about, the race to quantum supremacy between us and China, right? And the kind of panic that was on. And now, 10 years later, it just seems like within government, well, at least from the levels that I work at in government, it's not as big a concern. And I guess because our cyber at the end of the day inherently doesn't, they don't set the encryption standards, right?
Yeah.
There's other agencies that do that. But all the same, though, we still maintain strong relationships. And I've got probably the top three quantum companies that produce the top three quantum encryption platforms in the nation. They're in our ecosystem. I do have conversations with them. And they ask a lot of why questions. Yeah. We've got one more from the audience. The question is, how do you deal with bias in government employees that consider companies bad or greedy? With expressed concern about U.S. companies will only exploit the poor in country X, when that U.S. company was the only entity that could have developed the technology that we in the DoD needed.
Yeah.
The tough one.
My solution is always find another person to deal with. There's never just one. And it, everybody, I assume most people are operating from the principle that they want to be a good person. And so this person probably thought they were being a good person. And it's hard to argue with somebody who's a true believer like that. So it's like, well, all right, I'm going to find somebody else and see what I can do. Because, something like that, as a younger man, I enjoyed those fights. Now, I don't have time.
With age comes patience.
Exactly.
Tim, that was our last question posed, but I just want to say to you, as the CFIC look to build more venture capitalists into our ecosystem, maybe do you have some advice, particularly for a command like our cyber with limited acquisition authorities, how maybe we can leverage or begin to leverage venture capital into the capabilities development that we need for our cyber war fighters every day?
Well, and I think it can start with things like CRADAs, like cooperative research agreements, events where venture funds bring their portfolio companies in to showcase what they can do. And it need not necessarily be Army Cyber saying, here's what we need. It could be, hey, bring your operators. Let's see what's state of the art. And it, the venture capitalists understand it's not always going to lead to a contract, but any exposure to government is going to be better than none. And so I think, even if there's not a lot of acquisition authority, being able to create vehicles to expose Army Cyber to state of the art and vice versa. Because in many cases, these startups may have no idea what Army Cyber needs or wants, and would love to develop something that is needed and wanted. And so I think being able to start those two-way streets is going to go a long way.
Yeah, I agree. I think the confusing part is how would that work with, and I'm assuming it's some sort of match, right? Maybe the Army's willing to, invest some R&D dollars into the development of a capability with maybe the potential for a venture capital match. I think that's very progressive thinking where we're at right now, right? Because we're dealing with, I think a lot of when we come to acquisition and procurement in the DoD, a lot of it is culturally focused. We've got to change this culture in order to do things faster. And I think the other thing is, I know with my team, we don't have a lot of experience with venture capital. So therefore, it's hard for us to go in with the confidence to convince our partners that this may be a really cool and worthwhile path that we would want to go down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're always interested in our collaborations with you, Tim. I really appreciate your time today. We appreciate you coming on to do this. And we will encourage everybody, our friends and all, to if they couldn't make it to the actual session online today, to go out to our site and watch the recording of your talk. And great work, very interesting. The Third Age of Geopolitical Capital, great book. Also saying to the audience, go out and get it. I know it's on Amazon, and it's really relevant and timely too. So thank you, Tim.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
That's all we have for today, Tim. Thanks a lot. We'll reach out to you later on.
All right. Talk soon.
Thank you guys for tuning in.